This is a squirrel. He lives in the forest. He gathers nuts. That's always been the deal. Nuts fall in the autumn. He picks them up, buries them, forgets where, panics later, finds some again. It's a system, a chaotic one. But it works. Except now, it doesn't. The nuts are early, or late, or weirdly soft in the middle. Some trees drop everything at once. Others don't drop anything at all. And the squirrel, who has always instinctively known when and where to find food, suddenly isn't so sure. He starts waking up with a strange feeling. Not fear, not panic, just a quiet, sinking sense of something's wrong. He can't explain it. There's no single disaster, no squirrel news headline, just 1,000 tiny shifts that don't make sense. It rains when it shouldn't. It doesn't rain when it should. The ground doesn't freeze when it's supposed to, then freezes hard in the middle of spring. At first, he thinks it's a fluke, a weird season. Then it happens again, and again. And now, every time he looks at a tree, he wonders if it'll still be here next year. This is what climate anxiety feels like, not full-blown panic, not running around screaming, but noticing, constantly, that the environment isn't doing what it used to do, and realizing there's nothing you, personally, can do to stop it. So the squirrel starts collecting more nuts, way more, double his usual stash, triple. He checks them constantly. He tracks sprouting patterns, starts reading bark formations like tea leaves. He watches the wind, the clouds, the squirrels up north. He can't stop thinking about it, because when the rules of the forest change, the whole idea of enough becomes blurry. What if winter comes late? What if it doesn't come at all? What if the nuts rot before he even gets to eat them? The anxiety isn't abstract. It's physical. It lives in his paws, his tail, his chest. He doesn't talk about it much, because every time he mentions it, someone says, "Yeah, that's just weather," or "Squirrels have survived worse." And maybe that's true, but it doesn't make the knots in his stomach untangle, because the fear isn't about right now, it's about later. It's about next. It's about knowing something's coming, but not knowing when or what or how bad. So he prepares, and prepares, and prepares, and feels no safer. Because no matter how many nuts he gathers, they don't answer the real question. What happens if the forest stops working? Climate anxiety is the chronic stress of watching your environment shift faster than your ability to adapt. It's rational worry in response to a system that's losing its rhythm. It's lying awake at night, wondering if this season is the new normal, is a word we'll even keep using. The squirrel doesn't know what to do with this. So, for now, he just keeps collecting, keeps scanning the sky, keeps pretending everything's fine. But inside, he's not afraid of running out of nuts. He's afraid the trees might stop growing them altogether. If you've also noticed the nuts are falling weird this year, like, subscribe, and maybe we'll figure out what's going on before the moss starts glowing. The squirrel has stopped collecting nuts. He's now managing an operation. He's built 7 stash sites, categorized by altitude, soil type, sun exposure, and wind vulnerability. 1 is flood-proof, 1 is fire-resistant, 1 is entirely underground. He checks each one daily, sometimes twice, sometimes in the middle of the night, just to make sure. He doesn't sleep well anymore, because every creak in a tree sounds like collapse. Every gust of wind feels like a warning. He's not storing nuts. He's bracing, and he's exhausted. Because climate anxiety doesn't just sit in your head. It runs through your whole system. It's background noise you can't turn off. A constant hum of what if. What if the season shifts again? What if the food chain breaks? What if the forest stops behaving like a forest? He doesn't talk about it, because when he tried, the responses felt useless. Don't worry, nature always finds a way. Or you should focus on the positive. Or you're thinking too much. Maybe, but someone has to. So he spirals inward, reads every bark scroll about drought, migration, root loss, extinction. He joins a nut forum, watches a 5-hour video titled 15 Things They Don't Tell You About Oak Dieback. He bookmarks half of it, downloads the other half, wakes up at 3 a.m. thinking about acorn acidity. He's aware this isn't healthy. But what's the alternative? Not caring? He tries that, briefly. Takes a day off, lies in the sun. forces himself to ignore the wind patterns. It works for 11 minutes. Then he hears a tree crack somewhere in the distance, and it's back. Because climate anxiety isn't about panic. It's about helplessness. It's not being afraid of storms. It's being afraid that the forecast no longer applies. It's watching systems break down slowly, while others pretend it's just a glitch. He starts snapping at other squirrels. Why aren't they worried? Why are they still living like everything's fine? He knows it's not fair, but part of him resents the calm. He doesn't want to be right. He just doesn't want to feel so alone with the knowing. And that's the cruelest part of climate anxiety. You're scared, you care, and somehow you feel like the crazy one. So you keep planning, keep scrolling, keep piling nuts on top of each other, hoping one day it'll feel like enough. But it never does. Because deep down, you know, this isn't a nut problem. It's a forest problem. And no amount of local preparation fixes a global system. He's not trying to survive winter anymore. He's trying to survive watching the forest change without losing his mind. And honestly, some days, that feels like the harder task. Eventually, the squirrel stops adding to his stash. Not because he feels ready, but because he's exhausted. He's got more nuts than he can carry, more piles than he can check, more backup plans than actual days in the season. And he still doesn't feel safe. Watches the wind, doesn't calculate anything, just breathes. It's awkward at first, like forgetting what you were panicking about. But in that space, something shifts. He realizes he can't stop the forest from changing, but maybe he can stop trying to outrun it. Climate anxiety doesn't go away. It doesn't resolve like a broken branch or a patch of bad bark. It sits in the background, like static, like fog. But fog is easier to walk through when you stop sprinting. So the squirrel chooses one nut, just one. He doesn't store it, doesn't chart it, doesn't rank it. He plants it. It might grow, it might not. But it's something, because climate anxiety isn't solved by hoarding, or over-prepping, or obsessing over every root twitch and rainfall pattern. It's managed by doing what you can, and letting that be enough. He still checks the weather, still watches the trees, still gets overwhelmed when a hot wind blows in too early. Takes a breath, finds one thing he can do today. Sometimes that's gathering nuts, sometimes that's resting, sometimes that's just not Googling oak mortality rates at 2 a.m. He stops trying to feel okay and starts aiming for steady, because you don't have to be fine to care. You don't have to be calm to take action. You just have to keep going. So he prunes a tree, joins a replanting effort, shares a few spare nuts with a younger squirrel who's just starting to notice the shift, not as a fix, but as a gesture. Because the truth is, no single squirrel can fix the forest, but we all live in it. And caring, even when it hurts, is part of being awake. He still worries, still gets stuck, still lies awake, sometimes wondering if it's all too late, but he no longer lets that feeling turn him to stone. He lets it move through him. And then, he plants another nut, not out of certainty, but out of intention. And that might be the best we get. Not control, not comfort, just choosing to keep going, even when the future looks foggy. Because even in a shifting forest, a single nut, planted in the right soil, still has a chance. He still worries. But now, he also rests. And plants. If this helped you breathe a little deeper, subscribe. We're not fixing the forest, just learning to stay present in it.